All right, Kevin, thanks for coming on. This is the first time we've connected in a long time. We went to the same high school, so this is really cool. But you've been killing it, man. There's been multiple times when I've been on Bleacher Report or something like that, reading a Ravens article, and literally multiple times without even realizing you wrote it. And then I get to the bottom, I'm like, damn, who wrote this? I go to the top, and it's Kevin Oestreicher. I'm like, I know that dude. That's sweet. So, anyways, wearing my Ravens shirt
Yeah.
tonight. But yeah, so thanks for coming on, man. Just let's just dive right into the middle of it. That's kind of how I like to start these things. So, um, you're doing reporting for the Ravens now. Explain to me how you got into that, and then yeah, we'll get into the playoff run that they're on right now.
Yeah. So obviously graduated from Friends back in 2016, and I wish I had performed better in high school. I definitely wasn't as focused back then as I am now. I ended up going to Dean College for a year up in Massachusetts, and kind of figured out that I wanted to be in the sports industry. Just didn't really know what direction that was gonna go in. There are obviously a bunch of different avenues you can take. And after Dean, I was able to transfer down to Elon in North Carolina, finished out my final 3 years there. But my graduation year in 2020 ended up being COVID. So I was at home and kind of cut off the last couple of months of my senior year. But before that, I spent a couple of years in Los Angeles doing internships. So my first year in LA, I worked for a company not related to sports called Pocket Watch, which works with YouTubers generally in the 7 to 12-year-old range, kind of like YouTube kids. And I helped them with their marketing strategies, audience retention, and kind of just getting a feel for any skills I could apply to the sports industry, but not directly within it. Went back to school, went back to LA the next summer and worked for ABC TV out there as well as the Locked On Podcast Network as a social media intern. So I was, doing projects for them, trying to grow their Instagram and Twitter from very small stages. And I had developed a relationship with my boss there. And at the time, they didn't have a Ravens host. In the summer before, I had started to write for the Ravens Wire, which I still am at today, just in a contributor role. And at the end of the summer, I kind of just, jokingly said, "Oh, if you need a Ravens, because I'm a huge Ravens fan." I was like, "Okay, well, if you need a Ravens guy, I know my stuff and cover the team." And he was like, "Oh, really?" And I was kind of like, "Oh, okay, I guess we might be doing this." So I did a couple demos. Had never done any media, radio, TV, whatever it was. Had no experience doing it, but they liked my work enough over the summer as well as they saw the potential in me. I clearly was not as polished back then 6 years ago as I am now. They gave me a shot to do it. Started that up in my Airbnb first last week. I was in LA actually. Went back and luckily, with this job, it's all remote, so I'm able to do this from where I am. And so when COVID hit, it was devastating all across the board. But I was still able to continue writing, continue doing the podcast, and life takes you in all different funny places. After school, I thought I had a job lined up with ESPN and data and working in their data department. But obviously, with the way that COVID hit, Disney had to let go of a lot of people and the job market was obviously at an all time low. So that avenue didn't end up working out. A really cool experience to go through all that. But I kind of just dove full time into the media space. When I grew up, I wanted to be a scout. I wanted to work for the team and, scout and identify. And I still love doing that. I'm able to do it just in a different space, but you're kind of in this industry. You got to take what opportunities you're presented with and kind of run with them. And that doesn't mean you can't go on and do what you want to do later on. But I think the most important thing is whenever you get your foot in the door or have the opportunity to do so, you have to take that. So the network has grown tremendously. I've obviously added on things like Bleacher Report, like you talked about. I work over at the Ryan Ripken show, and I've kind of dove into the baseball scene a little bit with the Orioles, with him and all that different types of coverage. So my schedule is not conventional. I go to sleep at like 5 a.m. every night. I make my own hours and I get my work done. But it's a different life than I imagined, but I'm really glad it turned out this way for me.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. I've always just been a fan of sports media. I've always loved sports, always watched sports, especially Orioles and Ravens. Those will always be my favorite teams. But yeah, I've always loved the reporting, the announcing, um, the business side of baseball with the contracts and football as well. So yeah, super cool that this is what you're pursuing. Who are some of your idols in the sports media world? What podcasters or radio hosts or writers do you look up to and try to emulate?
Yeah, there were a lot, especially when I first started out with the network, just from a general network. Then I'll branch out to national guys. But I was told to go listen to a couple of the local guys that we had. Travis Wingfield was originally the Locked On Dolphins host, and he is now one of the big time guys over with the Dolphins. He actually turned his Locked On career into a career with the Dolphins, doing drive time shows and working with the organization. And when I was sitting down trying to get my feet into you know the sports media world and how to carry myself, it was those types of guys and people who still work for the network. I mean, I remember vividly, my boss told me, go listen to Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers and listen to the guys on our network to see how that works out. But then, growing up, obviously, I was a big Sports Center junkie back in the day. So, obviously, Stuart Scott is someone who I looked up to in the industry. Chris Berman, who obviously still does a really great job. And actually, I wasn't on for the interview, but Ryan ended up interviewing him on our show. And that was kind of a full circle moment of like, man, I watch this kid on my TV every day. And here the guy, the show is that I work on, talking to him. So those are two guys that I remember vividly from my childhood. And I remember even from a local perspective, listening to 105.7 every day. And I ended up doing my senior work project at Friends over at 105.7, 101.9 and CBS Radio. And I remember listening to guys like Scott Garceau and being able to kind of hear their opinions and the call-ins and all that they were able to do. So from a local perspective, I think it's really cool that now I have a weekly spot on 105.7 with the 10 to 2 p.m. show with, really great guys who, and Vinny Serrato and someone who had that experience being a general manager of a team. And I think that for me, seeing everything that I kind of looked up to as a child and all the paths that I thought I could take as a sports guy, because I knew sports was my passion. I've been on the sports train forever. But, being able to go on 105.7 at least once a week and, Vinny and Bob are awesome. Being able to work with some of the people that I grew up listening to or people that I grew up watching on a daily basis. That's been really cool to see. And then kind of being able to follow in their shoes, taking things from all different types of people. That's probably one of the coolest things as I've kind of dipped my toe into the industry.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. All right, I want to dive in and talk Ravens right now since they're about to play the Bills on Sunday night.
Yeah.
Do you know exact time and channel? I don't know.
6:30 is the time. Channel. It's on so many different channels nowadays. I can't even keep. But usually it was a CBS, Fox, ESPN. You're good. But now it's like they had Prime last week. Yeah, I don't know the channel, but I know it's prime time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm stoked for it. So. What do you think about this? What do you think the chances that the winner of this game wins the Super Bowl?
I think it's pretty high, actually. Kansas City obviously is not the Kansas City that we know of old. I think a lot of people look at their record and look at the wins that they've had, and it's been pretty fluky across the board for the most part. And I know that both the Ravens and the Bills have essentially like demons with the Chiefs. I mean, the Ravens haven't been able to get over that hump, and neither have the Bills. And to me, these are the two best offenses left in the postseason. I think Detroit, obviously, you could make a case for most definitely, but Detroit's defense scares me with the injuries. Not that they can't overcome them, but I feel like a lot of sports is just how healthy you are at the end of it. And the Ravens, obviously, Zay Flowers has missed the last couple of practices and missed last week's game. But other than him, Baltimore is really good in the health department. And honestly, Buffalo is too. So hopefully, knock on wood, no injuries for both these teams coming out of this game, regardless of who wins or loses. But these are two of the most talented teams left in the postseason. And even if they don't win the Super Bowl, I think that this game is probably the AFC Championship. But I don't want to completely discount Kansas City because obviously they've been there and done that, and they have that experience.
Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. I think Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are just peaking right now. They're both fully hitting their stride. They have their full physical, mental. It's all coming together at the same time. So this is a really cool matchup. I'm curious what you find in being a Ravens reporter about the organization. I think it's one of the best run organizations in the league. And I'm sure you saw the move that they made today with Deontay Johnson. They
right.
picked him up, even though they can't even play them, and that is likely going to get added to their compensatory formula.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're a Ravens fan, you've been a Ravens fan, you've seen them do these kind of savvy moves. We're probably, I don't, you might know, we're probably one of the best teams at getting compensatory picks.
Oh yeah.
And that's from our drafting and then also just strategic trades and all that. So what do you find what's your impression of the Ravens organization? Is it the best organization in the NFL?
I would say so. And obviously that goes beyond the on-field play. And I saw something, maybe it was yesterday or today, that so many organizations across the league would do anything to have the early success. Because again, the Ravens, they came in the league in 96 and they already have 2 Super Bowl championships. Some teams have been in this league for 40, 50 years and haven't had one championship, maybe even haven't gone to the Super Bowl in that time. So the consistent standard of excellence on the field is obviously great, but it goes so far beyond that because we see organizations all the time just have dysfunctional locker rooms or drama every single season, and that just never really happens with the Ravens. Now, they're not perfect. It's, of course, happened at times, but I think that they have committed so much to their off-field excellence that you know that when you become a member of the Ravens, whether you're a player, a coach, a member of the staff, an executive, that there are standards you have to uphold. And if you don't uphold those standards, you're not going to be a part of the organization anymore. And so they have held that for so long to the point where, I mean, I think that you see the way that I see it is the way that it resonates with veterans, maybe guys who are in the 30s and are looking for one last deal to either chase for a championship or just be a part of a healthy organization. And we've seen that all across the board. I mean, most recently it's guys like Calais Campbell, who obviously is now in Miami, but it's Steve Smith Sr., Anquan Bolden. You can go back and Derrick Mason.
Kyle Van Noy this year.
Van Noy's a great one. Jadeveon Clowney, who was his running mate last season. I mean, we could talk for probably an hour about all these free agents that the Ravens have brought in. People think that they're washed up and they're like, okay, really? How is this guy? This isn't the same ex-player this was 8 years ago, 5 years ago. And obviously, I think the Ravens have the right principles in place and the right training programs in place and the right strategies in place. But you don't go to an organization and do that as consistently as the Ravens let that happen in terms of getting guys back to their, not maybe peak of their powers, but back to a really good part of their rotation. If you don't have everything right, which means on the field and off the field, you talked about the Deontay Johnson move, which again, it's like Deontay's not stepping foot in the locker room again, but the Ravens want every single statistical, analytical advantage that they can get, even when it comes to an asset perspective. They want every asset advantage they can have. And so even because no one was claiming Deontay because he can't play in the postseason anymore because he was cut. But the Ravens say, hey, we traded for him. We have those compensatory rights. Let's go see if some team will sign him to a deal that qualifies for that. And then you feel more comfortable making other moves because you have more draft picks. So Baltimore's been, I think, the standard across the league for many years now. A lot of people acknowledge that. And it's really cool to see how an organization that, again, it's not the longest tenured organization in the NFL. It hasn't been there forever, but they've already established such a high level of standard there.
Yeah. And I think one thing that they do really well too is the self-reflection. So like they know where they're strong, they know where they're weak. And Derrick Henry is a big hole that they plugged in the offseason. I'm curious what your thoughts are on Derrick Henry and how do you think he can impact playoff Lamar? And what does he bring to the table that we're going to see in this upcoming week and hopefully future weeks after that?
Yeah, I think it's perfect for both guys. Obviously, when the Ravens brought in Derrick Henry, there's always a lot of controversy now around running backs of like 30-year-old. Is that cut off and you're no longer good after you're 30? But I don't buy too much into that. And I think that the whole notion of not paying running backs is silly because we see what guys like Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs have done for their new teams this year. But I think it just eases pressure off of Lamar. And that's what Derrick Henry's done for Lamar all season and vice versa. It's been both guys who have been able to work in tandem with each other to make sure that they don't have to be Superman for the entire game. Both guys are Superman, but one game it's Lamar Jackson carrying the workload, another game maybe it's Derrick Henry, and then one game it's both of them doing their thing. So it's been really cool to see. how those two have obviously formed a relationship. They're at the 2019 Pro Bowl together, and there's a viral clip from there about Lamar saying, "No, just give the ball to Derrick. Just let Derrick run. Like he'll do his thing." And so that obviously is fostered into what it is today. And in terms of the playoffs, I don't know about you, but obviously I'm not a football player. But if I had Derrick Henry in sub 20-degree weather running straight at me, I'm stepping out of the way and saying, "Have fun in the end zone." I'm not trying to tackle Derrick Henry over and over and over again for 4 quarters. And I think that's what we saw last week with Pittsburgh, where the Ravens ran 50 times. And you get in all those collisions. You have to get super physical for that often against the guy who has said he puts hundreds of thousands of dollars into his body every single year to make sure that he can be all the way at the peak of his powers every single time he steps on the field, regardless of how late in the year it was. It almost reminds me back in the day of like Brandon Jacobs on the Giants and like how that guy was just a massive human being. And when December rolled around, you knew that with some of these bigger backs, it's just like you don't want to go out there and step in the way of that guy. And so you have to commit more of your defensive manpower to stopping him. But then once you do that, Lamar can take the ball, or they can work play action off of that and throw the ball over the linebackers that are cheating down to try to stop Derrick. So obviously, the Ravens have had great running backs in Lamar's era. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. I mean, those guys are no slouches, but they're not Derrick Henry. And what I said when the Ravens first signed him was the Ravens didn't need to sign a running back. But this isn't about improving the Ravens' rushing attack. It's about making the ceiling higher than it was. And I think that we've seen that over the course of this year.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen records and all across the board. So it's been a really fun season so far. You mentioned the cold, and you mentioned Derrick Henry's size and power, and that's affecting the cold. I'm curious. Let's just say, for hypotheticals, that the Bills and the Ravens are a pick'em game. It's a coin flip in standard average weather. As the game gets colder and colder, who do you think gains the edge over the other? Because we've got Derrick Henry, massive guy, scariest scariest ball carrier in the league, and then you've got Lamar Jackson. The running threat becomes more important as you go colder and colder in a football game. But on the other side, you've got Josh Allen, probably the biggest, burliest quarterback
Yeah.
out there. So who do you think gains the edge in these extreme cold? This will probably be the coldest game of Lamar's career so far.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Josh Allen being as big as he is because I think that has been an underrated storyline, which is not just Derrick Henry is this like power guy. Josh Allen obviously can do that too. And it's different running back versus quarterback in the whole 9 yards there. But I do think it favors the Ravens just because the Ravens are a bigger team, and I think that they can be more physical than Buffalo can be. Buffalo's defense it's lighter. So when you talk about guys like Ed Oliver, Matt Milano, some of their defensive packages, they like to play super light, multiple defensive backs out there. And then you have this Ravens team that like trots out 300-pound guys, a 300-pound fullback. You got Derrick Henry. It doesn't match up well with Buffalo. The Bills are going to have to be uncomfortable in terms of what packages they want to run. They tried to do it early in the week 4 game in terms of playing their base packages, playing with multiple defensive backs on the field. And obviously on that first play, Derrick Henry goes almost 90 yards for a touchdown on the opening possession of the game. So I think that the cold weather paired with how physical the Ravens can be, not that the Bills aren't physical, Buffalo's offensive line is also really good. But it's just going to be a matter of you almost look at like a triangle diagram of the top 3 teams in the AFC. It feels like Buffalo loves their matchup with Kansas City. It feels like Kansas City's gotten the better of Baltimore for the majority of Lamar and Mahomes' battles with each other. And it feels like when you look at the matchup, the Ravens match up on paper better with Buffalo than they do with Kansas City. So sometimes it is just matchup based, where I don't think Buffalo's a bad team. They're one of the best teams in the league this season. But sometimes you just run into a matchup that it's not your day, and that might be what happens against the Ravens on Sunday.
Yeah. I'm really excited. This is a big one. I want to shift gears a little bit to the Orioles, the other side of the highway. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw Zach Lowenberg just signed a
Yes.
contract with them.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah, I'm stoked for him. He's been on the coaching staff with the Astros the last couple of years. So another guy we went to high school with is absolutely killing it, which is fun to see. But it's got me thinking about the Orioles. I texted him. I said, "Yo, I'm stoked for you and the Orioles since we're getting an asset in him." But
right.
yeah. So what do you think about the Orioles this upcoming year and the next few years with the young core that they have? what do you think they need to do to kind of cross the gap, get to that next level, and really compete in these playoffs? Since they've shown they can do it in the regular season, they've shown they've got the talent, they've got the all stars. What do you think's missing for them to put it all together?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the big things with the Orioles is it all goes as far as the young core goes. I know a lot of people are talking about go and get a veteran, which I do agree with. I think that they're taking some risks trusting the young core as much as they are, but you have guys. It's going to come down to how Adley can bounce back from his second half slump last season. Obviously, it was a really rough end to the year for him. If Gunnar Henderson can take the next step, but then guys like Jackson Holliday, who everybody in Baltimore is expecting to be the next bright young star of this team, they have a lot of those guys. So when Anthony Santander hasn't signed anywhere yet, but assuming that he goes elsewhere, it's going to be up to guys like Heston Kjerstad to step into that spot, whether it be as a DH or playing in the field. Colton Cowser, who obviously has had tons of moments in his young career. There are a lot of guys, but I think last year the Orioles were a bit too young, where they let Kyle Gibson go and they let some of their locker room presences go. And not that Corbin Burns wasn't a good vet leader, and obviously that was a great move in general, but it just felt like they needed more of that. And so they've brought in guys like Charlie Morton and others who I think can be stabling veteran presences in that locker room. But I think it all kind of goes back to the rotation. I think that's where everybody's kind of worried right now because Corbin's a big loss. I mean, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And right now on paper, the Orioles are a worse team than they were last season. But that's right now. We could be talking again in July, and everybody that we needed to take steps, if you're the Orioles, they have all done that. So you're saying, okay, well, yes, Corbin was a loss, but now Grayson has gone to another level. And Zach Eflin is still the guy that the Orioles had at the second half of last season. And maybe Cade Povich is in the rotation, and he's taken a step forward. So there's always a balance. And I know that for the Orioles, this is not like their World Series or bust year. They're going to have years to compete after this. And I think for Mike Elias and company, it's about how do we plan out the next 5 years, the next 10 years. It doesn't always work that way. There have been plenty of teams that have had great young cores, and you think, okay, this team's going to run the league for the next 15 seasons, and then they fizzle out after 3 or 4. So in order for the Orioles not to do that, it does have to be a balance, but no one was expecting the Corbin trade when it happened. It happened in the middle of February, beginning of February, and everybody was thinking, yeah, the Orioles could really use that ace to take the next step. I just think it's a little more risk-based for Baltimore this season, where it's a bunch of one-year deals, bunch of vets, and you just don't want to be in the same spot you were at the beginning of this offseason to the beginning of next offseason, where you've plugged all these holes temporarily. But I do think as the next year goes on, let's say, they're going to have to try to identify some other pieces that can be multi-year mainstays. And they had the best farm system in baseball, and they have utilized that. Guys have graduated, guys have come up and been great. They've moved on from other guys as well. But I think that this year, next year, and the year after, the next 3 years are going to really tell us if this Orioles team is a true contender or if it's just going to be another one of those teams that it's kind of like a what if situation with them.
Yeah, I'm hoping they can pull together, and of course I have faith. Yeah, like you said, I think it comes down to that pitching. I'm hoping that I don't know, this is going way back, but the Orioles lost Eric Bedard in a trade with Seattle way back, but he was one of the top dogs in the AL, and he kind of fizzled after that trade.
Right.
But he was never like he was always kind of coming out in the sixth inning, and would kind of lose his efficacy in that third time through the lineups, which Corbin had a little bit of that MO. He'd dominate early, but wasn't, I don't know if he had that, first game of a wild card ace written on him. So that maybe that's just me rationalizing, but I'm
no, I get it. Yeah.
Hoping that they Grayson or someone steps up and is the guy in that rotation. All right. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the media business. You touched on it in the beginning, kind of gave your story of how you got into it. It's pretty cool. It's an interesting space, and I think it opens so many doors, since at the end of the day, it's communications, it's presentation. Do you have specific goals of what you want to do in this space? Or are you just kind of getting your foot in every door you can and seeing where that trail takes you?
Yeah, I think it's ever changing, especially in the media industry, where I think every even year something new pops up where in college, I knew that I wanted to establish a social media presence for myself, and I had started out tweeting just on the Locked On Ravens Twitter account. This was 2019. I was a senior in college. Really hadn't put my thoughts out there, and that's something that still to me every day is kind of like continuing to put my thoughts out there, be me. That's one of the big things where like you're gonna get criticism. Not everybody's gonna like you. Like that's okay. Like that's supposed to happen. And that's something that early on with, me having never done that before, I had to learn pretty quickly that like, you're not going to please everybody and that, you need to stay true to yourself and not try to, because if you start being unauthentic, that's not what people are tuning in for. I've had to realize that people tune in to your content for you, not to hear what they want to hear. And obviously, there are going to be disagreements about opinions and going to be different things that maybe I say that people don't agree with, or maybe people say that I don't agree with, but that's just the media business where everybody has their take, everybody has their opinion, and that's okay. And so when it comes to the audio space and the video space, establishing a social media presence was key to me early on, and why I moved away from the Locked On Ravens account more so to my own brand was because I wanted to create that branding for myself early. So I used a bunch of different strategies, and my goal was if I hit 10,000 followers on Twitter, that would be my big goal. And now I'm at 40,000 plus, and that's been a really big avenue for me to not only grow my brand but to promote my show, to get opportunities. And I've had a lot of opportunities come through social media, which has been really cool. I started late on the Instagram. If I have one regret, it would be not starting Instagram sooner, because I think that could have really been a big boon for me. But I'm slowly starting to grow that up now. I have so much going on. I have to stop and start it every couple months because it's just like things get so busy, and I was like, wait, I have to post here and I have to post there and I have to post everywhere. And that can be time consuming, but it's worth it when you're able to grow communities. And I think that's one of the coolest things for me. So I'm taking every opportunity I can right now. Obviously Locked On has been amazing. I've loved every second of doing Locked On Ravens, and I'm really excited for the future of the show and the network in general. It's grown every single season. Obviously writing for USA Today, that was the first job I got, was writing for USA Today back when I was a junior in college. And then, doing work with Ryan and diving into the baseball space a little bit more, the Baltimore community a little bit more, has been awesome. And then again, like doing streams on Bleacher Report has been really cool too. So I think that there's always going to be opportunities. It's just a matter of, my mindset is never turning down, an interview, because it can lead to connections or reconnections like this, like you and I doing this right now. Like it's really cool for me to be able to share knowledge and have conversations with people. And that's something that I didn't know that I wanted to do back when I was graduating high school or my first couple of years of college. But the media space grows literally almost every day. There's something new that pops up, something new that happens. And I think to me, my strategy is always ever evolving, because you want to not only keep up with the trends, but you want to be able to be somewhere or be someone that someone can go to and get, in my case, the best Ravens information that they can get. So it's been awesome to kind of grow my brand and see the journey that's come. I never expected to be all this. I kind of expected it to be something that I pursued for a little bit, saw what happened, and then made decisions based off of that. But it really has been a big part of my life. It's been my life, and it's something that I'm super grateful for.
Yeah, and so what I'm getting from you is that you love the sports. That's at the
Yeah.
core of it, and so that's the trail you've kind of followed, and it's taken you in all these other directions. I'm wondering what parts of the media world are the most exciting that weren't your initial passions, that aren't actually related to the sports, and then what parts are the most frustrating, just as you try to grow your brand and build out your presence online. What do you find in those two best and worst?
Yeah, I think what's exciting for me, obviously not related to sports, but still related to my work, is the community aspect of it, where I've become a trusted voice of, Ravens sports, whatever it may be. And the way that my show works is, people, if you listen to the show every day, because I am a daily show, these people, wake up with me every day on their drive to work, on their drive home from work. And to kind of sit back and realize that like I am a big part of these people's lives, and I'm making a positive impact, at least mostly, except when people don't agree with my takes. But regardless, I think it's been a really cool thing to naturally build out the communities. You know, I know that some people do it differently. There are a lot of different strategies people can take, but natural growth for me was one of my big things where I wanted to try to get every single strategy I could and curate it into a plan for me to be able to say, hey, where am I going to be in a year? Where am I going to be in 2 years, 3 years? And what do I want? What are my goals every single year? And I've surpassed most of my goals I've set, but that's not possible without the support that I get on a daily basis. And that is because of the community that I've fostered and grown. And that to me has been it's been exciting because that goes beyond the sport of like having a connection with these people. And now I've jumped into the live show space over the last couple of seasons and, you know, reading off the chat and connecting with those people, whether it is about the sports takes or just about life. Like, hey, where are you tuning in from? I try to say that after every, you know, show I start. And you get people from Baltimore. Obviously, that's a big part of my base. But, you know, you hear people from Portugal and Brazil and all over the world, all over the country. And that to me has been really cool. And then I guess frustrating or I guess difficult parts is that, you know, you never really know what's coming in this industry. Obviously, you know, I've had great support from the people around me. My schedule can be very hard to deal with. And, you know, my family and the people close to me have been very giving with their time and understanding about that. As I mentioned, you know, my schedule used to be I would go to bed at 12 p.m. and wake up at 7 p.m. because I am very much of like, I don't want to miss anything. And the reason I work late hours is because things can happen in this industry in the middle of the night. And so I've had things where I've recorded a show at 7 at night and then at midnight, well, the Ravens go and they hire someone or the Orioles go make this move. And all of a sudden the work that you put out in the morning or you're going to put out in the morning is old. And my thing has been, I want to be a reliable source. And something that the network taught me from a very, you know, early portion of when I started was that it takes a really long time to build up trust with a listener or someone who watches you, but it takes a fraction of a second to break it. And to me, if I put out like things about old news and I'm not, you know, I don't have to be the first to something, but I want to have my content be relevant to what's happening at the time. And if my content is talking about something, even for me, that is not relevant even 12 hours ago, but I'm talking about old news, that's not giving people the latest updates and they will go somewhere else to find that. So I want to be a source of trustworthy information and they know that I'm showing up every day. And that's been a really cool thing for me as well, is seeing all of the, not records, but I guess the milestones that I've hit. You know, tomorrow's episode that I'm going to record tonight will be my 1,425th consecutively on the weekdays. I haven't missed an episode since 2019, including, you know, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever it may be, or a 5-day-a-week show. And I've stayed committed to that because that's what the show is 5 days a week. And so sometimes that'll be recording 5 shows in a night and then going somewhere and putting those shows out. But obviously, if there's something that happens, I'm going to put my stuff out there and record when I need to. So the sports media industry in general, you're always moving with it. You know, you're always going to be at the mercy of it. And that's kind of what I've had to accept. But that's what makes it makes it exciting, I would say, too.
Yeah, that's super cool. Sounds to me like you've got kind of some of that Ravens perspective where
Yeah.
you're have a good feel for where you're strong and what threads to follow and double down on, which ones to step back from. So
yeah,
super cool, man. Yeah, I'm really glad we got to reconnect here. I'm really excited about this Ravens game. So yeah, it's just I really just can't wait for that. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be rooting for that. I know you got to get going in a couple minutes, so I don't want to hold you up here, but yeah, thanks for coming on, man. This was a lot of fun.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on. And anytime you need me, I'm more than willing to come back. This was great.
Awesome. Appreciate it, man.